Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is a great turnout. My name is Karen Anton, and I am a member of the Reston Museum Board. So on behalf of the museum, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program, This Way to Reston. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Tonight's program is being recorded for future posting on YouTube and the museum website. So a little bit about the museum, for those of you who may not know, it is a community organization that seeks to preserve the past, inform the present, and influence the future of Reston through educational programs like this one. So as a nonprofit organization, we depend on donations and memberships from the community. How many people in the audience here tonight are members of the museum? Okay, pretty good. The rest of you, if you would like to join after the presentation, you may go over to that table and do so. There's also some merchandise there for sale. So if you enjoy tonight's program and you're not already a member, please consider signing up and visit the museum, which is just across the plaza here. And talking about that, I'm going to make a plea here for anybody who might be interested in volunteering to help out at the museum. It's really a fun thing to do if you enjoy meeting people and talking about Reston, and you'll get a little orientation, so you won't be at sea. But if that is something of interest to you, please let us know tonight, and we will follow up with you on that. And we do a lot of great things throughout the year. I'm sure you know about the cardboard boat regatta, which is one of the most fun things that Reston does. And that's coming up in August. And we do the home tour. We do 5 programs of this ilk here in the community center throughout the year. And so we need your support to continue doing these wonderful things. So please consider doing that. Transportation was a key influence in the establishment of Reston. The Dulles Airport, then under construction, and the Dulles Toll Road, which was then called the Airport Access Highway, influenced Bob Simon to purchase this property for implementing his idea for a new town. While the area in the 1960s was largely wooded farmland, he suspected correctly that one day this area would be an active area with people traveling to the airport. And the master plan identifies roads that already existed, as seen here in this image, and stated that the location of the planned town center was influenced by the roads that would surround it. So you're looking at an image from the master plan.
This is Dave Doldine with WTOP, and way before doing traffic and weather on the 8s, I was doing the weather for the morning announcements at South Lakes High School. And before I drove, I walked there on several of Reston's many paths. The question, how many miles of pathway does Reston have?
I know Mike McDermott knows the answer to this. Does anybody else know the answer to this question? Yes, ma'am. 55 plus, yes. Thank you very much. You don't get a prize, but you get recognition. Okay. So today Reston has 55 miles of pathways. So this drawing is from Reston's story. So Reston's planners emphasize pathways in their plan. Residential plan zoning new to Fairfax County made possible the separation of vehicular and pedestrian circulation, providing walkways in areas which often will be separated by vehicular routes. Safer travel is provided for children to and from school. The walkways of Reston will be interesting and varied for adults as well. And that was a quote. Trails are also used by Reston's bikers. Today, Reston is one of the largest pit stops during Bike to Work Day, and you're going to be hearing a little bit about that later. The tracks of the W&OD Trail were pulled in late 1960s and the Reston section was paved in the mid to late 70s. 1982, the Reston Bicycle Club formed to promote cycling.
Over and under, how many underpasses does Reston have?
Who knows the answer to that one? Do, 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 do. Yes, sir, in the back. No, I'm afraid not. Anybody else have a? Getting closer. 23? Nope. That's a little bit too much. It's 26. It's 26. Okay, so Reston has 26 underpasses. In the 1960s and today, underpasses play a large role in fulfilling Reston's founding principle of beauty. Olim, Rusum, and Gonzalo Fonseca created artwork at Reston's first underpasses. And today, Public Art Reston works with artists and Reston students to create artwork for Reston's underpasses. So like underpasses, bridges also assist Restonians to get from one place to another. Here, of course, is the bridge going over Wheelie under construction and after it was completed. And here's another trivia question which didn't make it into the PowerPoint. How many bridges does Reston Association maintain? Any idea? Think about the trails and all the footbridges and anybody want to take a guess? 30. 30? A lot more than that. 65. 55? 65, no? 107. 107 bridges are maintained by Reston Association. So boats are used in Reston's man-made lakes, both for recreation and for practical purposes. Earlier Restonians took boats to Lake Ann Village Center to pick up groceries, as seen in the image on the right. So while not encouraged today, lakes have been used for swimming. One such example is the late Joe Stowers, who we have heard swam to work in Lake Ann. So Joe was an original Restonian. I think he bought the 49th house in Reston or something. He was a transportation consultant. What brought him to DC from San Francisco, I believe, was to work for Department of Transportation, which was called something else before it was called that, and I don't remember what that was. He was a bicyclist. He organized annual bike trips. He was the chair and co-chair of Reston Planning and Zoning for over 15 years. So early correspondence demonstrates that the street names were considered as a part of Reston's PR campaign. Those involved urged forward thinking of street names and cluster names so that they could be used when needed and not made up on the spot. Street sizes determine whether they would be avenues, drives, roads, or lanes. Depending on the type of road also determined what name it would have. Drives and roads were named for local industries, trades, lanes after flora and fauna. Using the word cluster instead of street, road, etc., at first received pushback from Fairfax County. Bob Simon insisted, and it went to the Board of Supervisors, who ultimately granted permission for cluster to be used in a street name. Not all names thought of were used. Thornton Avenue, for example, was not to be. When the name was proposed to the county, they were informed that Thornton was already being used elsewhere in the county. Therefore, an alternative name was sought, and Wheelie was selected. Now, Thornton and Wheelie were both previous owners of the Reston property. So Wheelie was an incorporated town in western Fairfax County, occupying a part of what is today Reston. So Dr. C.A. Max Wheely was a German-born physicist who retired from his practice in Philadelphia in 1881 and moved to DC in 1886. And in partnership with General William McKee Dunn, he purchased 450 acres of forested land along the W&OD railway line for about $20,000. The portion that was ultimately divided between Walter and his partner, and Walter ended up, Walter Wheely ended up with over 3,200 acres north of the rail line. An early publication stated that the southern part of Reston would have a center with hitching posts so that youngsters can ride to town and do shopping for mother. And there would be miles of bridle paths winding through Virginia's suburb country. And in reality, the bridle paths were not created. And while some did ride horses around Reston, as seen here, it is not prevalent today. But I can tell you, I've been in Reston for 34 years, and I do remember seeing people on horseback across from the pony barn. So Reston's North Point and Lake Newport areas developed in the 1980s to call to mind the seaside communities of Rhode Island and Virginia. So roads therefore take on this theme: Center Harbor Road, Greenwich Cove, Waterfront. Falls Chapel Court and Winding River Court were also abandoned street names, as there were no falls, chapels, or rivers near the neighborhood. It was recommended that replacement names capture the nature of the site's wooded surroundings. There's also a special curb style in North Point. I didn't know this. I don't know how many of you know that. Courtesy of a lot of convincing by Reston Land Corporation and mobile land development. So usually curbs are kind of a right angle, and in North Point, they're sloped. So next time you're in North Point, take a look at that.
VDOT maintains the majority of roads in Fairfax County and Reston. Do you know the only road that Reston Association owns and maintains in Reston?
Not Temporary Road. Does anybody have any idea? Okay, so this is it. It's part of North Village Road. It's 0.2 of a mile in North Hills Park. We suspect that this was something that Reston Land Corporation thought would be a drive-through park anchored by the two facilities, the pavilion and the pool there. That didn't happen, but that's why this is the 0.2 of a mile that Reston Association owns and maintains. So the airport access highway that I referenced earlier was not immediately accessible to Restonians. It opened up first to commuter traffic only in the 1970s, and then to all Restonians in the 1980s. Gulf Reston assisted in financing and building of ramps for buses to have access to the Dulles Toll Road. Now, this is an image from the Reston Times, July 1970, preparing for building the western access ramps to the toll road from Reston Avenue. Okay, so in 1984, Reston Land Corporation began a marketing campaign to encourage people to consider Reston as an extension of Washington, D.C. They created pins and bumper stickers called "Welcome to Reston, D.C." and even printed ads declaring the toll road the Reston Expressway. So what I wondered when I saw this is, how is this read? Is it "Welcome to Reston, D.C." or "Welcome to Reston, D.C."? I don't know. There was an article published in October 6, 1984 in the Washington Post about this. The title of the article was "Reston Proclaims Itself the One for the Road." And I'll read you a couple of excerpts from this. She says, "If you live in Reston these days, you could get the impression that your community has somehow picked itself up and moved into the district." So Reston Land Corporation is in the middle of an expensive and controversial advertising blitz that has dubbed the Reston Expressway that just opened Dulles Toll Road. The campaign has both angered and amused developers and public officials and confused residents of Northern Virginia. Some folks are fiery mad, but some of those most offended agree that the road needs a different name. Merely calling it the Dulles Toll Road does not accurately describe the area it serves, they say. Next week, an ad scheduled to run in the Washington area will tell the 900 companies who had the foresight to locate next to the Reston Expressway that your driveway is ready. In September 1978, a gold-plated spike was driven into a wooden plank placed at the end of the newly built Wheelie Avenue Bridge. It took 2 years to build the bridge and cost $775,000 by Reston Land, who also prepaid the county property tax for 3.5 years, one of the last, if not the last time, prepaying taxes was allowed. The sledgehammer used to dedicate Martha's Bridge is at the museum. Okay, so here we have Tom D'Alessandro, Reston Land General Manager, former RA board member. Martha Panino, I don't think I have to tell many of you people about her, but she, for those of you who don't know, she was a 24-year member of 1968 to 1992 of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. She was directly responsible for so much in Reston, too many things to list. She was known as the mother of Fairfax. Two of the things she was responsible for are the Dulles Airport Access Road and Fairfax County Parkway. And Peter McCandless, who spent 30 years promoting the new town of Reston. Before founding the McCandless Company in 1984, he was corporate vice president of public relations for Gulf Oil. So this shows all three ceremoniously cutting a ribbon at the opening of Reston Parkway at Route 7. And for those of you who want to look it up, there is also a Washington Post article from November 10th, 1988 about this and about the parkway to open Reston, and it's called Last Frontier. Parkway to open Reston's Last Frontier. I can't read my own notes. Sorry about that. Okay. Reston has had several bus services over the years. Common Ground Transportation was operated by the Common Ground Foundation, which provided service within the Reston area only. Volunteers drove the bus. Reston Community Bus would later become known as Reston Internal Bus System, or RIBS, which is now operated by the Fairfax Connector. All right. The Reston Commuter Bus began in 1968 and brought mainly government workers into Washington, D.C. The ride included coffee in the morning and a happy hour on the way back. RCA's Commuter Bus Committee assisted in making recommendations on route and time adjustments for the bus. There's a video coming up, and I will tell you that the audio is extremely low. Fortunately, there are subtitles, so please read those.
We're able to get a commuter bus system going on our own.
The Reston commuter bus system started with a single bus in 1968 and is now carrying more than 1,000 passengers a day. The system is managed by the riders themselves. Usually in the front of the bus there are people who want to sleep or read, and in the back of the bus we usually have a club section in which people sort of enjoy themselves a little bit more.
That video was from Eyewitness News, by the way.
Approximately how many bus stops does Reston have?
Anybody have any ideas? Now, yeah, it's now. Anybody else? Okay, we're about to find out. 362 bus stops in Reston, and Mike McDermott, who you'll hear from shortly, has visited all of them. The committee has. The committee has? Okay. Okay, with the opening of the Silver Line in 2014, Reston got its first metro stop. November 2022, it was extended to Ashburn, as you all know. And that brings us to today. So if you enjoyed tonight's look at Reston's past, I encourage everyone to watch the 2022 Chris Rooney MAP program, You Are Here, which is available on Reston Museum's YouTube channel. His exploration of historical maps, including discussion of pathways and street names, is included, so please check it out to learn more. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mike McDermott, who is the chair of the Reston Association Multimodal Transportation Advisory Committee, otherwise known as MTAC. Mike?
Okay, so it took me about 6 months to figure out what that name was. I'm not responsible for it. You'll find out in a little bit where it came from, Multimodal Transportation Advisory Committee. But it should give you a little hint as to how complicated transportation has gotten, and we'll take a look at that in just a minute. The purpose, well, before I move, figure out how to move the slide, there are at least 4 jurisdictions that impact transportation in Reston. So one would be the Reston Association in terms of the trails, right? Another would be Fairfax County in terms of DOT, right? Fairfax County DOT. Another would be Virginia DOT. Anybody know what the 4th one might be? No? Well, WMATA or the Metro, right. Now the airport is, I say about, so the airport is yet another thing, but I'm not going to get into that. So we'll just look at the 4 jurisdictions for now. So let me see if I can get this moved. So the purpose of MTAC is to provide basically transportation policy recommendations to the Reston board. We're a committee of citizens, just like you all, members of Reston. There's no requirement in terms of being a transportation engineer to be on the committee, although we have a transportation engineer right at the moment in terms of the committee. But basically, it's us living in Reston, dealing with the transportation issues, and then trying to pass that on to the board. So that's what we try to do. And we look at it in 5 different areas. So pedestrians, bicycles, vehicles, buses, and rail. So all of those come together in various different ways, and we try to provide some kind of at least input to the board in terms of what's going on. And let me just give you a list of some of the recent activities that we've been involved in. Sorry for the smashed up, but the committee has been doing a lot of work. Recently, a couple of years ago, it was noticed that there was ice on some of the paths. So the idea was, should we have a sand bucket near some of the icy paths? So we did a test to see if there was a sand bucket and a little shovel, would someone actually take the sand out and put it on the icy patch? Lo and behold, they did. And so we're now trying to put together a budget proposal to see if we can get more sand buckets on the paths themselves. We worked with a Boy Scout Eagle on his Eagle project in terms of identifying hazards and solutions on the Turquoise Trail. And the Boy Scout did a phenomenal job. He put together a 63-page report with photographs and identifications of hazards and then potential solutions and the like. So it was a wonderful partnership in terms of working with Boy Scouts. One of our members identified some 5 connections with some 5 external trails. So Jerry Conley Trail, WO&D, the Fred Crabtree, to name a few. And there were some like 22 connections with Reston trails. And so we recommended putting some signage up at the intersections of these trails so you would know where you were on the trails. We completed the 6th edition of the Reston on Foot and Bike, or ROFAB, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. And we also put together the bronze level bicycle-friendly community status application. It was no small feat. There was 120 questions on the application. We had a committee working like all summer on engineering questions, education questions, policy questions, and then we were given the bronze level. So that's good for 4 years, and so we're happy about that. But it allows Reston to claim itself as a bicycle-friendly community. We did a bus stop inventory, so the committee fanned out and we visited all 362 bus stops, looking at it from is there a shelter? Are there trash cans? Are there benches? Is there a sidewalk? Is there a crosswalk nearby? Are there curbs? Because there's a range of safety levels in terms of bus stops, and what we wanted to do was put together some recommendations to pass on to Fairfax County, and so we're in the middle of doing that now. But I have to tell you, it's an amazing experience to drive up and down, say, Wheelie Avenue, and then try to find a place to park to go then to find the bus stop. You take your life in your own hands, basically, is what happens. So, we identified the lack of signage between the new Reston Town Center metro stop and the Reston Town Center. So you can get off the metro, but you can't really, you really don't have signage in terms of how to get there. So we put together, we did a little walk, took photographs, and then passed that on to various folks in terms of creating a better signage for that pathway. We provided support to the Transportation Connectivity Working Group, which developed the transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan, which I think everybody's aware has been underway for a couple of years now. And then finally, we do a spring and fall virtual town hall to allow folks to identify issues that we can then forward to whatever jurisdiction needs to hear about it. So tomorrow night at 6:30, we'll be doing the spring town hall, and we'll be focusing on pedestrian hotspots near schools. So it'll start at 6:30, and you can go to the Reston Association website to the calendar and get the link if you're interested in that. So that's just a range of some of the things that we've been involved in. Yes, sir.
What or where is the Turquoise Trail?
Turquoise Trail is like the sort of parallels Lawyers Road. I'm sorry, yeah, Lawyers Road, and goes down along that valley, I believe. So there's like 5 trails, and that's one of them. So I wanted to talk about just briefly Reston on foot and bike, because this is a good example of the community coming together over a long period of time in terms of developing recommendations for how to better the infrastructure for both pedestrians and bikes. So for example, how are the sidewalks linking to pathways? Are there good pedestrian lights? How are the intersections in terms of pedestrians? And so the work on this goes all the way back to 1991, when the first ad hoc group got together to create what became the first edition of what we call ROFAB, Reston on Foot and Bike. It was updated in 94 by the same volunteer group, and then in 99, Reston Association had a facilities advisory group that did the work. Then in 2008, the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee took on the task, and then they also updated it in 2014. In 2016, the pedestrian or PBAC group was combined with the Transportation Advisory Committee, and that became MTAC. And so MTAC then took on the responsibility in 2020 for updating this. You can go online and get a copy of the report. It's a 30-page report. The easiest way to get it is to put Reston on Foot and Bike in a Google search, and that'll take you to an easy link to it. And then just a little peek into the future, which is actually now. We're looking at micro mobility in terms of issues. And so you've probably seen, for example, scooters parked along various sidewalks and the like. Not only are there scooters, There's also the occasional Segway. There's now battery-powered unicycles, battery-powered skateboards, and there are hovercrafts. Now, the hovercrafts are still touching the ground, but I expect them to take off any day now in terms of the Back to the Future. But all these items are now on our pathways along with people walking. And the question is, what do we do about that? How do you regulate that if you can regulate it at all? And so these are the things that we're looking at and we're wrestling with right now. But that's the current state of the future. So with that, my name is Mike McDermott. If you have any questions or want to talk to me about the committee, feel free to give me an email or an email at that address, and be glad to chat with you. Before I sit down, let me do a little advertising. There are brochures on the table for the next Bike to Work Day, which is May 19th. There's going to be, I think, a lot of activities. I think it's at the bike lane, so that's kind of near the post office in terms of where the pit stop's going to be. So if you want to participate, I'm told that you're not supposed to drive your car to a Bike to Work Day. You're actually supposed to ride it. I did that once. My wife really, she let me hear about it for years and years and years. So anyway, Bike to Work Day, May 19th. Yes.
If you work from home, can you just do a pretend community?
Sure, you can do whatever you want, absolutely. And then you can stop at the bike lane and get a drink or whatever. So there'll be booths there and all sorts of things. So with that, let me wrap it up.
Oh, yeah, make it clear what the bike lane is, right?
Well, it's a bike shop.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a bike lane, it's a place. Thank you so much, Mike.
Sure.
Okay. And now we have Colin Mills, who is a project manager, I believe, for the Reston Accessibility Committee, which is a part of RCA. Okay, take it away, Colin. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everybody. So I am Colin Mills, and I'm with the Reston Accessibility Committee, and I really appreciate Karen and the Reston Museum including accessibility in this presentation, because too often accessibility is the missing piece when we talk about the greater picture of transportation. So first, a little bit about RAC for those who aren't familiar. As Karen said, we are a committee of the Reston Citizens Association, and RCA has long been involved in transportation-related projects. We were the committee that oversaw the commuter bus that you were seeing earlier, the party bus with the drinks in the back. Sadly, we don't have those at RAC meetings today. But RAC was founded after we had a forum in 2008. We were doing a series of forums at the time on issues that affected our community. And we held a forum on accessibility and visitability, which is the idea for people with disabilities to be able to visit the homes of other people who don't have disabilities. And the turnout for that event was tremendous. It was held here at the Lake Ann RCC facility, and the room was so full that it was hard to work your way around. And so we realized that this was a tremendously important issue to a lot of people in the community. And so we felt it deserved more attention, and thus we founded RAC. Our mission, as it says up here, is to advocate for barrier-free access for people with physical disabilities. So barrier-free access is an important term to us because a barrier can be anything that creates an issue for somebody who is trying to have safe and comfortable access to where it is they're trying to go. It can be anything from a curb, one of those right-angled curbs that we were talking about earlier, to not having enough space between parking spaces to bring out your wheelchair, to a steep that's too sloped, or a door that's too narrow to fit your mobility device inside. And a lot of people might look at those things and say, those are no big deal. And it may seem that way to those of us who are able-bodied, but that's the point. Things that are no big deal to us can be a tremendous deal that can cause problems for people with disabilities from getting around and doing the things that they need to do. So when we work with, on our projects, RAC strives to be a partner with the facilities we work with rather than an adversary. We practice what our chair, Ken Fredgren, calls the 3 Gs. We work with good faith, in good faith, with goodwill, for the common good. In our time, we've completed over 40 accessibility projects. And in transportation, there's the concept of the first and last mile. This ties into what Mike was talking about earlier about the bus stops. You can build the most beautiful bus or train system in the world, but if people can't get to the bus stop, if they can't get to the train station, it's worthless. And with RAC, we're focused on the last 10 yards, getting people out of their cars and into the building where they're trying to go. The projects that we work on, we always begin with an accessibility assessment. One of our project managers will go to a site and evaluate the accessibility at the site from a variety of different angles. And we don't just point out problems, we suggest solutions. And then once we produce our report, then we work directly with the property owner or the property manager to work with them to implement those solutions. A couple of projects I wanted to highlight here. There are two school projects up there, Hunters Woods Elementary and Herndon High School. And that's actually, those are some of our older projects, but more recently, over the last couple of years, we have been working, we did an assessment of all of the elementary, middle, and high schools serving the Reston area. I think I see Cynthia, is that you? Cynthia? Yes, Cynthia Weller was the head of that project, and she did a lot of good work going to a lot of different schools and putting that assessment together. And we've been working directly with the construction folks over at FCPS, and we've accomplished a lot of good already and a lot more on the way. Also wanted to mention the Pony Barn Park, since we were talking about the Pony Barn earlier. That was a really great project for us because when it was time to update that park, Reston Association put together a working group, and they included us on it because they wanted to make sure that the park was accessible. And Ken Fregman, our chair, was a member of that committee, and he worked closely with them to make sure that there were a lot of changes made from the way that the paths were designed to making sure that the picnic facilities were accessible and making sure that there were accessible porta potties on the site. And it's really great work. If you haven't been over to the Pony Barn Park, I highly recommend it. I also wanted to point out the Sunrise Valley Center because that one holds the record for the most projects that we've done. We've done 3 separate projects specifically at that one center, which is located near the intersection of Soapstone and Sunrise Valley over by the giant net over by the golf course over there. So it's a pretty small shopping center, but there were a number of issues with it. So one of the things that I really appreciate about working with RAC, I think probably the thing that I appreciate most, is that you can actually see the work that we've done. You can look around and you can point to a crosswalk or you can point to a curb ramp and say, that is something, that is a positive concrete change that we have made to make life better for people in this community. A number of the accessibility improvements we've made, a lot of them have to do with accessible parking spaces or APS, what a lot of people call handicap spaces. Both making sure that there are enough of them for the size of the parking lot and the size of the facility, but also making sure that they're in the right location. It's important, obviously, for the APS to be located close to the building, but it's also important that they be level. By law, APS can slope no more than 2% in any direction, and you would be surprised at some of the so-called accessible parking spaces that we have seen in our time that were built on significant hills, which obviously were not serving the purpose that they needed to. Access aisles are those striped aisles between APSs that allow people with disabilities to get out their wheelchair, their mobility device as they're getting in and out of the car. No, those are not loading zones. For those of you who have occasionally have seen parking in those spaces, that's not what they're for. But it is designed so that there is enough space for a person who is, who has maybe the wheelchair in the back of their car or the mobility device in their van. They can get their ramp down, they can get their mobility device down, and they can get safely in and out of their car. Accessible routes connect those APSs to the front door. That may include crosswalks. It may include routes taking you to sidewalks, curb cuts, things like that. Door thresholds are a perfect example of the kind of thing that able-bodied people almost never notice. I mean, you look at, right underneath the door. What could possibly be a problem with that? But if it is too tall or if it is too steep, a person with a wheelchair has a very hard time getting over that. So even a perfectly accessible facility, if that door threshold is too steep, that can be a barrier. Another thing I wanted to highlight here is accessible picnic tables, because whenever I mention that, people are always like, how can a picnic table be accessible exactly? Well, the way that they're designed, the legs slope inward so that a person using a wheelchair or mobility device can pull up to the end of the table and they can sit and they can have a picnic with their friends. I also wanted to present a couple of those concrete examples of some of the things that we've worked on. This is an example. This is a shopping center. We've worked on a lot of shopping centers with RAC over the years. I picked this particular one because I had the pictures handy, but we've worked on, I would say probably at least a dozen different shopping center projects in our time. The before picture there in the upper left-hand corner, that is a staircase. And obviously, if you have a mobility device, a staircase is a serious problem. So we worked with property managers. We got them to take out that staircase and replace it with a ramp with railings along the side, which is properly sloped and allows people to get safely in and out of the parking lot that's right next to it. The one in the lower left corner there, this is a perfect example of the kind of thing that people tend not to think about when if they're able-bodied and they're designing a shopping center, for instance. On the far side of that sidewalk there's a curb cut that leads to the street. And if you're coming from across the street, you can take the crosswalk safely across there. You can come up the curb ramp, and then you can get right over here about 15 feet, and then there's a curb, and you can't go anywhere. So they opened up a curb cut. They put in a crosswalk, which happens to connect to that ramp up in the upper right-hand corner, and that leads you to another crosswalk, which takes you to the accessible parking spaces that we have installed there. This is how you create a network of accessibility that can open up a whole shopping center and make it a lot more accessible. This one is Temporary Road Park. This is a project that was completed last spring. We worked with Reston Association on this one. Here in the upper left-hand corner, you may not be able to tell, but originally there were no accessible parking spaces at Temporary Road Park. So we worked with them to get 2 spaces installed, which is appropriately sized for the facility. We got an access aisle between them, and then to the left, we got proper signage installed, those curb stops, and they're built on a concrete pad, which ensures that they're not only level now, but they'll stay level for decades to come because concrete doesn't heave and shift as much as asphalt does. The lower left-hand corner there, you can see the path that originally led from the parking lot to the picnic shelter, and it looks perfectly fine to most of us, but it exceeds the 5% grade, which is the maximum allowable slope for a person with a mobility device to get up. So what they did instead was they installed a nice, properly sloped concrete parkway that connects to the new APS that they built, and it goes sort of sideways up that hill. They were able to leave the existing pathway in place, so now it's you've got that double access from either end of the parking lot, and it doesn't affect negatively anything that's going on at the park. It just means that people with disabilities are able to use it properly and share and have picnics and parties along with the rest of us who are able-bodied. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about RAC and our work, I invite you to visit our website, which is restonaccessibility.org. I realize it may be a little hard to read there because it's in yellow, but if you're interested in getting involved, I urge you to contact our chair, Ken Fredgren, who has been the chair of RAC since the beginning. He's a wonderful man who I personally very much enjoy working with at the address up there. And I look forward to seeing you out and about in Reston. Thank you very much.